I think the hardest part about moving abroad is that you have to leave behind people that you love and you can't see each other as often as you want. In my case, it's only 1,000 kilometers between us, but for the past couple of years, traveling to my home country has become a challenge. However, at the end of this summer, I had a chance to host my sister and my 2 little nephews here in Finland. We had a wonderful time together. Though the weather wasn't on our side, it was raining so much during those days, and the boys were bitten by mosquitoes, so they got a true taste of what Finland is like. It was interesting to see their impression, and to be honest, they inspired me to make this video and to share more about life in Finland on this channel as well. For those of you who are new to this channel, hi, my name is Olia. I moved to Finland in the beginning of 2020, so it's been nearly 4 years since I've called this country my home. I think it's obvious that your perception of the foreign country depends on your previous life experience and what you are looking for in life. So before we dive deeper into this topic, I feel I need to say a few words about myself first. I come from Ukraine. It's my first home. I grew up and studied there. It's the place where I made some of my best memories, found my friends, and even met the love of my life. For my 22 years in this country, I developed a deep connection to it. I was lucky to be born there, but I had the choice to move, and so I chose to live. Growing up, I never dreamed or even thought about moving to another country. But when I was 20, I went on my first trip abroad and it affected me. Because for the first time in my life, I got to see how different life could be from what I knew growing up. Like, easier in so many ways. As I traveled more, I watched different perspectives on life and I started to better understand what I want from life and how I want to live. When I returned home, it felt like I was re-entering my old bubble and I couldn't stop thinking about the life that existed outside of that bubble. Day by day, I started to pay more attention to the bad things around me, which made me feel anxious and unsafe. It was eating me alive and I knew that I had to make a change. It's not an easy decision to leave the country where you became who you are. It makes you doubt yourself a lot. But life is about making choices, and I made mine. As I share my thoughts about Finland, I try my best to be honest and to look at both the positives and negatives here. Although I have to admit finding negatives will be hard for me, because I love Finland. I think Finland is amazing. That's the reason why I moved here. The first thing about any country is its people. I bet you've seen tons of memes about Finns being introverted. There is even a webcomic called Finnish Nightmares. The main character in it is an introvert Matti, the Finn whose shyness makes it difficult for him to deal with everyday situations, like to ride in an elevator with strangers or to interact with people on public transport. Although these old stereotypes have some truth, I think they don't show the complete picture of the Finnish people. It's indeed true that Finns value their personal space and they might seem a bit distant at first. But what I've learned is that below the surface, Finns are actually very much open and ready to connect with new people. The fact that they might seem a bit introverted comes from their culture of respecting each other's time and space. Let me explain here by referring back to a picture of a bus stop where people keep their distance. What's important to know here is that keeping distance is not about trying to isolate yourself from another person, and it's not meant to be disrespectful, but rather it's actually more about showing respect by not invading others' personal space. The same goes when, for example, in public transport, people always try to find an empty row of seats before sitting next to someone else. As a foreigner, I can say that you accept and adapt to this new normality almost immediately. I know it from my own experience because when I visited my home country the last time, I didn't expect such close contact with people on the bus, and it made me feel quite uncomfortable, even though I used to travel like this every day. Another thing that is worth mentioning about Finns is how they talk and their view on communication overall. Well, to begin with, small talk is something that practically doesn't exist in Finland. The question "how are you" is a real question here. It's taken very literally and requires an honest answer. Therefore, when Finns initiate conversation, it's usually driven by genuine interest and not because of the pressure to make small talk just to be polite. So, yeah, small talks are not very common in Finland, but it doesn't mean that Finns don't like talking. I can't tell you how many times we'll stop to exchange a few words with our neighbors. It often starts with the weather, but the conversation always moves forward, and so after a while a few words turn into a good half hour, and we are already talking about economic situations, traveling, or whatever comes up. I also had many situations when strangers came up and talked to me. As I often go out to film or take pictures, people usually come to me and ask what I'm shooting, and word by word they start telling me about different species of trees or something about the architecture. Finns love Finland, they are proud of their country, and they like to hear that foreigners enjoy Finland as much as they do. I often get questions like, how do I like Finland and why did I come here? I have to say that I was surprised by this attitude because I myself am a highly introverted person, and in my home country people are rather closed. So to be honest, I find Finns quite talkative. I can see your skepticism here, but seriously, come to Finland and see for yourself. Try to start a conversation with local people. The stories about Finns who don't speak much or who get annoyed if you talk too much are mainly myths, and I think they appeared because of the Finnish manner of speaking. The thing is that the Finnish language has a rather flat intonation, and it may sound even monotone to a foreign ear. So often when Finns speak English because of their neutral tone, it may sound like they are emotionless or cold or perhaps even angry. So keep this in mind, and also you must be prepared that silence in conversation with Finns is actually okay and is not considered as something awkward. Finns respect silence and are comfortable with it. Also, it's important to know that honesty is highly valued in Finland, and so people tend to be quite straightforward. When they talk, they usually mean exactly what they say, and they don't try to make things sound nicer or more complicated than they are. And I think this is great because honesty helps create a society where people trust each other and can rely on what they hear from others. So, yeah, to sum up, the stereotype about introverted Finns is just that, a stereotype, and it often comes from not understanding their culture. However, it's important to note that just like in any other country, people come in all sorts of personalities and have different ways of communicating and expressing themselves. The next thing I want to talk about is the speed of life. I want to bring this up because it's something that really caught my attention as a cultural difference, and it still amazes me. I remember in my first days in Finland, I was walking around the city and I was genuinely shocked because so many people outside were just chilling or spending time with their loved ones. People were just having fun and enjoying their life. This was a big deal for me because growing up back in my home country, I saw the pattern from adults that life is tough and there is no space for fun. It's not a secret that life in Ukraine has always been tough and people had to work really hard to provide for themselves and their families. They simply didn't have time for anything else in their life. So when I started my first job, I followed and repeated the same pattern. I drowned myself in work, and I can't tell you how many times I stayed up late at night to finish my work and to do more than I should. And it wasn't just only me, many people I worked with did the same. Overtime was just a regular part of our job and was perceived as something completely normal. I think Ukraine is a super competitive society. You have to be faster, better, smarter, because otherwise you'll not be able to find a job that pays you enough just to fulfill your basic needs, like food and shelter. So it creates a lot of pressure to work harder and longer, and in result it leads to a more imbalanced way of living. But it's different in Finland. Here you can afford to have a decent life even working on a basic job, and access to quality education, healthcare and social support made it easier for people just to live their life without the constant worry of survival. So as a consequence of this, life moves in a more balanced rhythm. Working overtime is not really a thing in the Finnish working culture because people value their free time as much as their professional success, and the general mindset is that there is also many other important things in life than just work, like family, friends, hobbies, and so on. So there are pros and cons to both sides here, because I think Ukraine is a really incredible place for those who are very ambitious and want to advance their professional growth. Because you're surrounded by people who are ready to put extra effort to achieve their goals, and that feeling of ambition all around you can be very motivating. The competitive energy in society constantly drives you to improve your skills and challenge yourself. It's a very powerful booster for your professional growth. Besides, this dedication to work is recognized and highly respected by society. But the problem is that it doesn't really go with a healthy work-life balance. So it's a trade-off, because often you have to sacrifice your peace of mind and personal life. It's not even so rare to see many burnout people. The next thing I want to highlight here is one of the most important to me, and that is safety. Finland is one of the safest countries in the world, and I can definitely feel it. I can go for a walk late at night without a worry because streets are always well lit, and I just know that the crime rate is seriously low. Also, it's pretty common to see small kids outside without adults, and they usually commute to school on their own starting from the age of 7. In Finland, people trust each other and they value honesty, and I think this is a big reason why it feels safe here. If you accidentally leave your bag somewhere on a bench, most likely the next day you'll find it untouched in the same place, or you'll get a phone call from someone who found it. But there is one exception here: never leave your bicycle unlocked, because bicycles do get stolen. It's some kind of Finnish phenomenon. Moreover, you should lock it tightly. Once I saw that the only one wheel was left locked to a fence and the rest of someone's bicycle was gone. But usually they just get stolen by drunks who need a way to get home after parties. I guess it explains why sometimes you can find bicycles abandoned in different unexpected places like bushes. Speaking of safety, I want to say a few words about road traffic. I want to note that the road infrastructure is well maintained and designed to guarantee safety of all road users, whether you are a pedestrian, cyclist or driver. It's easy to get around on foot, besides it's also enjoyable. Sidewalks are always neat, and often they are separated from the main road by a line of trees or bushes. If you're a cyclist, you can always find a route with dedicated bike lanes, which is very convenient and makes it easy to get anywhere by bike. The driving culture also revolves around safety. If you're a driver, you'll notice that other drivers do not tend to violate the safety rules, not only because penalties are extremely high, but also because it's easy to follow these rules, since they are pretty clear, simple and reasonable. And last but not least about safety, you can really trust the police here, because they are known for their professionalism and simply for doing their job well. Finland is one of the least corrupt countries in the world, and so all the public institutions here just work as they should, and this contributes to a safe and stable environment. Finland also has a low risk of natural disasters. Sure, winters can be harsh, especially in the north, but overall it's good here. The biggest concern might be our eastern neighbor, but Finland has a strong and modern military to keep its people safe. Since we mentioned Finnish winters, let's now talk about climate and how it affects people's lifestyle. Due to its geographic location, Finland has 4 distinct seasons, and each has its own set of challenges as well as advantages that shape the way people live. The longest season is winter, which is cold and dark. It starts early in November and lasts until April. Here in the south of the country, in the darkest months, which is December, we have on average about 6 hours of sunlight per day. However, the further north you go, the shorter winter days are. In the northernmost part of Finland, the sun stays below the horizon and doesn't rise at all for about 52 days. During winter, lakes and coastal waters of the Baltic Sea freeze, and the ice usually becomes thick enough to support people and in some places even traffic, creating official ice roads. Snowy winters are very painful for the Finnish economy. The cost of the maintenance of infrastructure in winter is huge. Snowfalls can be really heavy, and removing snow during and after snowfalls is essential to keep streets and roads accessible. To reduce slippery, the streets are spread with gravel. It's a natural resource and it doesn't harm the environment. Some pedestrian walkways in cities are equipped with heated systems to prevent the buildup of ice. The cold season throws its challenges. Limited daylight can mess up with physical and mental health. But people here are trying to make the most of this season by engaging in different outside activities. Snowy fields and walkways become occupied by skiers. Lakes and football fields turn into ice rinks. Kids go sledding in parks and forests, and people who are brave enough can take a dip into an ice hole. Winter days are full of life and joy, and the cold doesn't bother at all, because the pleasant sauna in the evening can always warm up your body. In April, snow and ice melt, the new season begins. However, spring here isn't the most pleasant time, especially in cities. The gravel left on the streets releases dust particles. Naturally, wet conditions as well as snow and ice keep the dust down. But when snow melts and streets are dry, the wind and passing vehicles lift the dust into the air, and it affects the quality of it. Though it usually doesn't last for long because streets will be cleaned and washed as soon as the weather allows to do it. The warmer weather awakens the hungriest creatures of the Finnish summer – mosquitoes. They are not so common in towns, but in forests and near waters they are just merciless. Although mosquitoes here do not carry any diseases, they are really annoying and some people might experience a severe reaction to their bites. Despite this, the summer season in Finland is just wonderful. The days are warm and bright. On average in June in southern Finland we have about 19 hours of sunlight per day. And in the north, the sun doesn't set at all from May to August. Summer is the best time to go hiking, swimming, camping, or whatever your heart might desire. In Finland, there is a thing called everyman's rights. It means that nature is free for everyone to access and enjoy. It's an actual law that guarantees freedom to roam in natural areas, even if they are private, as long as you are respectful and cause no damage to the environment. The exception, of course, is private yards and gardens. Under this roof you can freely camp, fish, swim, pick berries or mushrooms and simply enjoy the beauty of unspoiled nature. In total, more than 75% of land in Finland is covered by forest, and there are hundreds of thousands of lakes. So, as you can tell, there is plenty of space for everyone to experience nature to the fullest. Moving on, let's now talk about one thing which is inevitable if you want to live in Finland, and that is language. Yes, the Finnish language can be tough, and I think it may seem even more difficult for English speakers. Let me explain. Finnish has very little in common with most European languages because it belongs to a completely different language family. It has a complex grammar with a system of cases and flexible word order. There are 15 different cases and each has its own set of suffixes. Words are often formed by adding multiple suffixes, and the root word can also be changed because of that. So, as you can see, Finnish has its own completely different logic of rules on how to build a sentence. As for me, the logic felt quite familiar because in Ukrainian we also have a system of cases with many different suffixes and endings, so I could understand the Finnish rules and which specific ending and why I need to put in different cases, because I could relate it to my own language. But for example, for English speakers it may be very confusing, because English doesn't use a system of cases and it has a much simpler grammar overall. Besides, Finnish has a unique set of vowels and consonants that simply doesn't exist in English. Here is a short example of how Finnish sounds.
Kaikki ihmiset syntyvät vapaina ja tasavertaisina arvoltaan ja oikeuksiltaan. Heille on annettu järki ja oma tunto, ja heidän on toimittava toisiaan kohtaan veljeyden hengessä.
But the good thing is that there is a clear relationship between the way a word is written and the way it is pronounced. A written letter is almost always represented by the same sound. Also, Finnish doesn't use articles and has no gender. Both males and females are referred to with the same pronoun, so at least it may be easier in this part. But anyway, if you don't speak Finnish, there is no need to worry, because almost everyone speaks good English here, especially in the larger cities. So you feel pretty comfortable here. But of course, if you want to fit in and become a part of this society, you just have to learn the language. Because I think that the language is much more than just a tool for communication. It can help you understand society better, because language reflects the way people think, their values, history and culture. So yeah, I think it's very important to learn the language of the society you live in. Besides, the Finnish government contributes to this. They create programs to ensure that immigrants have the support they need so they can adapt to the country. This includes intense Finnish classes as well as help with finding employment and accessing social services. It shows that Finland is interested in working immigrants to stay here, and also Finnish people generally have a positive attitude towards newcomers, as long as they are willing to accept local culture and integrate into society. You might have heard another stereotype that Finland is a racist and xenophobic country. I dare to say that it's completely out of touch with reality. As a foreigner, I've never experienced anything like this here. I had no problems with finding and renting an apartment, and overall I think that compared to the rest of the world, Finland is a very tolerant country. Even though it only recently became global, but the general trend of globalization is having a huge effect on Finns and Finnish culture. In the past years, Finland slowly moved toward multiculturalism. However, now with the new government, things might slightly change in the future. The reason is their proposal of new changes to the immigration policy, which involve stricter requirements for permanent residency and citizenship. For example, I can apply for my permanent residency at the end of this winter, as it will be exactly 4 years since I've lived in Finland. But with the new changes, I will have to wait for another 2 years and pass the Finnish language test. The new policy also brings some other changes which can make the lives of immigrants a little bit more complicated. The changes are now on hold because they were not greeted well by the Finnish society. The problem is that this policy is targeting mainly working immigrants, putting them in unfair situations. And this raises a question, why would a foreign high-skilled worker choose Finland over other European countries? And that is not good because Finland needs international specialists, and the Finnish economy partly relies on them. Besides, one member of the current government was caught on some old racist comments, for which she later apologized, but the ball was already rolling. So, as a result, thousands of people took to the streets protesting against the government. And once again, it shows that people care and Finnish society does stand against racism. So, to draw the line under all that I've said in this video, I wanna add that not everything in life has to be big, flashy or shiny just to be great. What truly matters is rather how things feel to you. And so, Finland is not trying to be flashy and showy. It doesn't have the highest mountains, shiniest towers or nicest sandy shores. Finland is just a place to live. To bike in the summer and ski in the winter, to go fishing with your kids in the evening, to spend a quiet weekend in a remote cabin, to walk your dog in the forest every day. And I think it's things like this that make life just great here. Sure, the language is hard, but all good things in life require effort, right? In the process of making this video, I thought to myself that if I ever decide to return back to Ukraine, I think I would miss Finland terribly, and it would be quite difficult for me to adapt back to the Ukrainian way of life in terms of work and the stress. Though I do miss many things about my Ukrainian life, because that is part of me and my personality. But Finland made a huge shift in my perspective on life. I've come to understand that life is not just a race from one milestone to another. Finland has showed me the true value of balance and taught me to appreciate the simplicity of life and the closeness to nature. If you are considering moving to Finland, I wanna say to you that, like in any other country in the world, it will take some time and effort before the place starts to feel like home. But don't worry, because at the end of the day, everything's gonna be alright.